Rain slammed against the windshield so hard I could barely see the road. The kind of rain that makes the whole world feel angry. The kind that arrives right before your life changes forever. I didn't mean for this to happen. Who's the father? My father barked. She hesitated. Too long. And I noticed something strange. Pastor Harper looked nervous. Not shocked. Nervous. At the time, I thought maybe he was uncomfortable. Now I know better. He's gone, Olivia whispered. My father stood up so violently his chair crashed backward. You expect us to raise another man's mistake? She's your daughter, I snapped. He ignored me completely. You have disgraced this family. Olivia cried harder. I'm sorry. No, my mother said suddenly. Her voice sounded colder than his. You knew exactly what you were doing. Mom had always been gentler than Dad. At least I thought so. But something about public shame transformed her into somebody else. You lied to us, she continued. You embarrassed us. Olivia's shoulders trembled. I was scared. You should have been smarter. That sentence still haunts me. Because no mother should ever say that to her child. Especially not a terrified pregnant daughter. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Dad pointed toward the door. If you want to live like an adult, he said, you can survive like one. Olivia stared at him. Confused. Broken. You're kicking me out? You made your choice. Rain thundered outside. I looked at my parents waiting for one of them to stop this madness. Neither did. Even Pastor Harper stayed silent. My sister slowly stood up. Still crying. Still shaking. And somehow still trying to protect them. I never wanted to hurt anyone, she whispered. Dad crossed his arms. Mom looked away. That's when I stood up too. If she leaves, I said, I'm going with her. Dad laughed once. Short and cruel. Then go. So we did. Olivia packed a single backpack. That was all she took from 23 years in that house. A few clothes. Some baby ultrasound photos. And an old stuffed rabbit Grandma gave her before she died. That rabbit was soaked from rain within minutes. I drove her to my tiny apartment across town. 1 bedroom. Cheap carpet. Broken heater. But it was warm. Warmer than our parents' house had ever been. Olivia barely spoke during the drive. She just stared out the window while holding her stomach. I kept glancing at her because I was scared she might completely fall apart. When we finally reached my apartment, she whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. I ruined everything. I parked the car, turned toward her, and said the most important thing I've ever said in my life. No. You were abandoned. That's when she started sobbing uncontrollably. Not polite crying. Not movie tears. I held her in the parking lot while rain poured around us. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Family can become strangers overnight. The next few months were brutal. I worked at a hospital billing office during the day, then cleaned office buildings at night. Double shifts. Sometimes triple. I barely slept. But Olivia needed stability. And that baby deserved better than fear. At first, she apologized constantly. For eating my groceries. For using hot water. For existing. That broke my heart more than anything else. Because it showed how completely our parents had convinced her she was a burden. One night, I found her crying quietly in the bathroom. I think the baby deserves a better mom, she whispered. I sat beside her on the floor. You already are a good mom. How? Because you're terrified. She looked confused. I smiled sadly. Bad mothers usually aren't worried about being bad mothers. That was the first night she smiled after leaving home. Tiny smile, but real. Slowly, she started rebuilding herself. She found a receptionist job at a dental clinic. Started saving money. Started buying tiny baby clothes from thrift stores. Every week, she became a little stronger. But our parents? Nothing. No calls. No texts. No birthday cards. No concern. 3 entire years of silence. It was like Olivia had died to them. And, honestly, part of me died too. I stopped attending church after that night. I couldn't sit through sermons about compassion from people who abandoned their own children. Especially Pastor Harper. Every time I saw him in town, he avoided eye contact. Back then, I assumed it was guilt. Again, I was only seeing part of the truth. When baby Noah was born, everything changed. The second Olivia held him, I saw light return to her face. He had dark curls, big brown eyes, and the loudest cry I'd ever heard. I loved him immediately. So did everyone else who met him. Except our parents. They never came to the hospital. Never asked for photos. Nothing. Olivia pretended it didn't hurt. But late at night, after Noah fell asleep, I'd hear her crying softly through the apartment wall. Sometimes grief doesn't scream. Sometimes it whispers for years. Noah called me Aunt Emmy before he could even say full sentences. By the time he turned 3, our apartment finally felt like a home instead of survival. Olivia laughed again.
Cooked again.
Sang while cleaning. The sadness never fully disappeared, but it stopped controlling her life. And honestly, I was proud of us. We built peace from wreckage. Without our parents. Without church support. Without anyone rescuing us. Then came Noah's 3rd birthday party. The day everything exploded. We kept it simple. Balloons from the dollar store. Homemade cake. A few friends from Olivia's work. Kids running around the apartment courtyard. For the first time in years, Olivia looked genuinely happy. I remember watching her help Noah blow out candles, her face glowing, and thinking maybe the worst was finally behind us. Then I saw my father's car pull into the parking lot. My stomach dropped instantly. Olivia froze beside me. Mom stepped out first. Perfect hair. Perfect makeup. Same pearl necklace she wore every Sunday to church. Dad climbed out after her. And standing between them, Pastor Daniel Harper. The moment Olivia saw him, all color disappeared from her face. Noah ran toward the door excitedly, not understanding anything. Guests, he shouted happily. I moved in front of Olivia immediately. What are they doing here? I whispered. She looked terrified. Not angry. Terrified. And suddenly I understood something was very, very wrong. Dad walked toward us slowly. Like he owned the place. Like 3 years had never happened. Mom forced a fake smile. Then Pastor Harper looked directly at Noah. And I swear to God, he started crying. That was the exact moment I realized the truth we never saw coming. And it changed everything forever. The second Pastor Daniel Harper saw Noah, his entire face collapsed. Not sadness. Not guilt.
Fear.
Pure fear. My nephew stood there holding a paper party hat, completely innocent, while a 52-year-old pastor looked like his world was ending. Olivia grabbed my arm, so tightly it hurt. Emily, she whispered, panicked. Tell them to leave. But before I could speak, my father stepped forward. We need to talk. No, I said immediately. You lost the right to talk to us 3 years ago. Mom's eyes filled with fake tears instantly. We made mistakes. Mistakes. That word nearly made me laugh. For 3 years they ignored their daughter and grandson like they didn't exist. And now suddenly they wanted forgiveness? Noah looked confused. He tugged on Olivia's sleeve. Mommy, who are they? That question hit everyone differently. Mom started crying harder. Dad looked uncomfortable. But Pastor Harper? He looked shattered. Olivia knelt beside Noah carefully. Their family. Noah smiled politely. The way children do when meeting strangers adults expect them to trust. Then he looked directly at Pastor Harper and said something that froze the entire courtyard. You look like me. Silence. Complete silence. I turned slowly toward Olivia. Her face had gone pale. Dad clenched his jaw. Mom looked horrified. And Pastor Harper closed his eyes like he'd just been shot. That's when the pieces finally started connecting in my head. The nervousness during dinner 3 years ago. The silence. The avoidance. The guilt. Oh my God. No, I whispered. Olivia started crying immediately. I stared at her in disbelief. No, she couldn't even look at me. Pastor Harper stepped forward shakily. Emily, please let us explain. I almost hit him. You. My voice echoed across the courtyard. You were the father? Parents nearby started staring. Kids stopped running. The entire birthday party went still. Olivia covered her face in shame. Dad barked quietly. Keep your voice down. I turned on him instantly. You threw your daughter into the street because she was pregnant by your pastor? It wasn't like that, Mom cried. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I can't wait to hear this explanation. Pastor Harper looked 20 years older than I remembered. I never meant for any of this to happen. There it is, I snapped. The favorite sentence of cowards. Olivia finally spoke through tears. He said he loved me. The courtyard became so quiet you could hear wind moving through the trees. My stomach twisted. How old were you? 22. And him? 49, Dad muttered quietly. I stared at the pastor with absolute disgust. You groomed her. No, he said immediately. It wasn't like that. But it was. Everyone standing there knew it was. Olivia had been vulnerable,
Trusting.
heartbroken after a bad breakup. And this man, this respected spiritual leader, used his position to get close to her. He counseled her privately for months, told her she was special, told her God brought them together. Classic manipulation hidden behind scripture. I suddenly remembered how often he volunteered to drive her home from church events. How Mom used to praise him for guiding Olivia spiritually. The entire thing made me sick. When she got pregnant, Olivia whispered, he begged me not to tell anyone. Pastor Harper started crying openly. I was afraid. Of what? I shouted. Consequences. He lowered his head. Dad stepped in again quickly. We came here because people found out. That sentence stopped me cold. What? Mom wiped her eyes nervously. The church board discovered everything last week. Of course. Not remorse. Damage control. That explained why they suddenly cared. Pastor Harper's secret had finally become public. And now my parents were terrified of community humiliation. Again. Always appearances first. Dad continued talking carefully. He resigned from the church. Resigned?
He left secretly.
He should be in prison. Several people nearby quietly gathered their children and left the party area. Nobody wanted to be near the scandal unfolding in public. Noah looked frightened now. He hid behind Olivia's leg. And that broke something inside me. This little boy deserves safety. Not this chaos. Not these hypocrites. Mom suddenly reached toward Noah. We just want to know our grandson. Olivia stepped backward instantly.
No.
Mom looked stunned. You can't keep him from us forever. Watch me. That was the strongest I'd heard Olivia sound in years. And honestly, I felt proud. Dad's face hardened. We're still your parents. Olivia stared at him for a long moment, then quietly asked the question that destroyed them. Where were you when I gave birth? Silence. Where were you when Noah had pneumonia at 8 months old? Mom started crying again. Where were you when Emily worked herself sick paying our bills? Dad looked away. Where were you for his first birthday? No answer. His second? Nothing. You abandoned us. Every word landed like a hammer. And the terrifying thing was, she wasn't yelling. Calm pain cuts deeper than rage ever could. Pastor Harper suddenly stepped toward Noah again. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to help support him. I stepped directly between them. You don't get access to a child just because you donated DNA. He flinched. Good. He deserved worse. Olivia wiped her tears slowly. For 3 years, she said, I believed I was the shameful one. Then she looked directly at my parents. But the people who should feel ashamed are standing right in front of me. Mom collapsed onto a nearby chair crying. Dad looked furious mostly because strangers were witnessing this. And suddenly I realized something important. They still cared more about embarrassment than accountability. Some people never truly change. They just panic when their secrets become public. One of Olivia's coworkers walked over quietly. Do you want me to call someone? Dad immediately straightened. There's no need for that. Oh, now he wanted peace. Interesting. Pastor Harper looked at Olivia desperately. I loved you. She stared at him with tears in her eyes. No, she whispered. You loved controlling someone who trusted you. That sentence silenced him completely. I don't think anyone had ever spoken to him like that before. Not church members. Not my parents. Not even himself. Predators survive through respectability. And once that mask breaks, they fall apart fast. Dad finally tried a different approach. We were trying to protect the family. I laughed bitterly again.
No.
Emily protected the family. Everyone turned toward me. I pointed toward Olivia and Noah. This is family. Not blood. Not reputation. Not church appearances. Family is who stays when things become inconvenient. Family is who answers the phone at 2 a.m. Family is who shows up. Dad looked like I slapped him. Maybe emotionally I had. Mom stood slowly and looked at Noah again. He deserves grandparents. Olivia nodded once.
He did.
That answer crushed her. I could see it, but truth hurts. Especially earned truth. For a long moment nobody spoke. Children's laughter echoed faintly from another building nearby. Cars passed in the distance. And our broken family stood in silence, surrounded by cheap birthday decorations. Then Noah did something none of us expected. He stepped out from behind Olivia, walked toward Pastor Harper, and held out a small slice of birthday cake. Because children don't understand betrayal yet. Pastor Harper started sobbing. Real sobbing. Noah smiled innocently. Cake makes people feel better. I nearly cried myself. Olivia did cry. Dad looked devastated for the first time all afternoon. Because the kindness they refused to show their daughter was now being shown by the child they abandoned. And somehow that made everything uglier. Pastor Harper accepted the plate with shaking hands. Then Noah asked quietly, "Why are you sad?" The pastor couldn't answer. How do you explain corruption to a child? How do you explain cowardice? How do you explain abandoning someone you claim to love? You can't. Eventually, Dad cleared his throat. What happens now? Olivia looked at him calmly.
Now.
She glanced around our small apartment courtyard. At the balloons. At Noah. At me. Then back at them. Now you live with your choices the same way I had to live with mine. Mom started crying again. But nobody moved to comfort her. Interesting how loneliness feels unbearable once you experience it personally. Pastor Harper slowly placed the untouched cake on the table. I'll provide financially, he whispered. Olivia nodded once. You should. Then she added something powerful. But money doesn't repair absence. I wish our parents understood that years earlier. You can replace furniture, replace jobs, replace houses. But time? Never. You never get missed birthdays back. Never get first words back. Never get those lonely nights back. Some damage stays permanent. Dad finally looked at me. You really cut us off for all this time. I stared at him in disbelief. All this time? Like it was some misunderstanding. Like abandoning his pregnant daughter was a scheduling conflict. You taught us something important, I told him. What? That love in your house always had conditions. He had no response. Because it was true. Obey us. Protect our image. Hide your pain.
Or lose your place in the family.
That isn't love. That's emotional control. And once you see it clearly, you can never unsee it. The sun finally started breaking through the clouds overhead. Funny timing. After hours of tension, the sky itself seemed exhausted. Olivia picked Noah up gently. He rested his head against her shoulder sleepily. And in that moment she looked stronger than every adult standing there combined. Not because life had been easy. Because she survived what should have destroyed her. Dad quietly asked, "Can we at least visit sometime?" Olivia thought for a long moment, then answered carefully, "Maybe one day." Mom looked hopeful immediately. But Olivia continued, "After trust is earned." That part mattered most. Forgiveness without boundaries becomes permission. And we learned that lesson the hard way. Pastor Harper turned to leave first. Smaller somehow, like the weight of truth physically bent him. Before walking away, He looked at Noah one last time. And I honestly couldn't tell whether his tears came from guilt or finally understanding what he threw away. Maybe both. Dad helped Mom toward the car. Neither looked powerful anymore. Just old, tired,
Human.
and painfully late. Right before getting inside the car, Mom turned back toward Olivia. I really am sorry. Olivia nodded politely. But she didn't run to her. Didn't collapse emotionally. Didn't chase closure. Because healing taught her something important. An apology does not erase abandonment. The car finally disappeared down the street. And silence returned. I looked at my sister. You okay? She exhaled shakily, then laughed softly through tears. I think so. Noah lifted his sleepy head. Can we open presents now? And somehow, after everything, we all laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes after surviving something unbearable. That night after everyone left, Olivia and I sat quietly on the apartment balcony while Noah slept inside. The air smelled like rain and birthday cake frosting. You saved me, she whispered suddenly. I shook my head.
No.
You saved yourself. She looked out at the dark parking lot for a long time, then said something I'll never forget. The people who loved us least taught us how to love each other better. And honestly, that was true. Because sometimes family breaks you. But sometimes surviving that break teaches you exactly what kind of family you want to become. And 3 years after being thrown out into the rain, my sister finally understood something powerful. She was never the shame in this story. She was the one who survived it.